I'm pretty sure we're going to have a president come in who helped create the last crisis because they deregulated money so much. I'm just going to go way out on a limb that if Hillary gets in, she very well could do that again. Her husband did it under his term, so I don't see why she wouldn't find a way to start lending money for nothing again. And again, it's not a moral lesson. My thing is, can somebody, we were talking about this, I've had the house, I've had it on the golf course, I had the newborn, the dog, and I'm mowing my own grass. It's got to be realistic to understand, can you be happy with just being a homeowner? And would I be happy with home ownership? I mean, that's a big statement and a big step, I think, that I don't think most people look at. They go, yeah, I need to own a house. Well, why do you need, this is the same thing with my ex-wife. Why do you need to own a house? Well, in her case, my ex-wife had to have that security for her to be comfortable. Because if I didn't, then let's be realistic. She's going to pass on whatever craziness she's got onto my daughter. So guess what? They're getting a house. That's kind of just the way that thing's going to go. But that's a realistic thing. Is it strictly come down to people believing in the security of purchasing?
Well, and see, you and I, we've talked and laughed about this again off the air. See, I think that your particular situation and philosophy, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying it's unique. And
I mean, I would be, again, when you're talking about, and for anybody listening, trust me when I say this, if you are in a unique place, let's say that in your case, if I wanted to get something on the lake with the lake view up on the hill, it's probably going to be cheaper to rent than for me to purchase a primetime viewing location or something that's on the lake, or it's just the way it always seems to work out. Even if the only places where I haven't seen it hold up are places like Malibu, where the numbers are so completely out of whack. But Venice is a great example. If I wanted to live at the beach, buying in Venice is insane. It's $500,000 to $1 million easily without batting an eye.
Right.
But I know that I can find myself a rental. It'll be small, but I can rent $1,500, $2,000, maybe as high, get a loft, go $3,000 a month. And for those doing the math in your head, $3,000 is cheaper than a $500,000 purchase.
Right.
And that's just mathematics. And the other thing is, it's always usually all included at those points when you buy those work-live lofts. Now, that only works for a single guy. I don't see how I would talk let's say that I was dating a single mom with a child, and we're going to get a house together, go find us something. Well, based on my track record, Elgin, I'm probably going to lease something because it's not going to be long-term, and just being realistic about myself.
Right.
And so I'm going to look at houses to lease, not purchase, because it's a bigger commitment, because I need that original value back. We were talking about this before. If I'm buying, I've got to plan to live there for the next 7 to 10 years.
Well, you know what? I think that people should do that anyway if they're purchasing a home. I think that you're purchasing the home obviously to make your memories and do all the stuff that you do. But you eventually, depending upon the circumstances, you're also going to get a level of appreciation. But let's suppose that you don't. Let's suppose that the property value never goes up. It never goes up, but you stay in there however long you stay in there, and eventually you pay that thing off or whatever the case may be. Maybe you use that as your 401k. Maybe instead of putting money into the stock market, maybe instead of putting money in some of those type of avenues, you double up on your house note. You get a 15-year loan. Maybe you do any of that stuff. At the end of the day, you have something tangible, and then you have something tangible that you don't pay any rent on. Now you've only got taxes. Now that you've got something maybe quote-unquote legacy-wise to pass down to your children or whatever can stay in the family, there are some things that you can do. Because there's one thing that I do know, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence that you're on. You're going to pay to live somewhere. So when you're paying to live somewhere, are you paying yourself or are you paying for someone else's legacy? That's the bottom line. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with either one, but that is what you're going to do. Now, like in your situation, I get it. Like, for instance, you know what? I would love to live by some water and all that myself. Realistically, though, I'm not
going to have that.
I know, but realistically, right now. But it's funny though. You know what? I was talking to So to my wife, I was talking to part of me is particularly now that the kids are in college and all that. Hey, you know what? Realistically, financially, I may not be able to, I shouldn't say be able to, I might not choose, just to be honest, to say have a second home type of a thing somewhere as far as owning it. We got a couple of timeshare things and all that are actually pretty good. But you know what? Like you were saying, you were telling me about, the little situation that you had stumbled into. I mean, something like that for me would make sense. You pay an extra, $1,000, $1,200 a month, and you're sitting on some water somewhere, and you go out there on the weekends or whatever you want to do, and all of a sudden it's your spot for for that. And in that particular instance, I don't have any responsibility to it. I don't have to maintain it and all that other kind of stuff. I can call somebody and they figure it out with the warranty or whatever the case may be. So depending upon your circumstances, that can obviously be something that's viable. But I think in a lot of cases too, Lee, you have to remember for some people, the only real tax deduction that they really have, are their children, their family, and their personal residence. And for some, that either don't have 401ks or don't have situation in your 401ks, you got to hope who's in charge of it is making some good decisions. But, they don't necessarily have that forced type of a saving situation where if nothing else, if they don't do anything else but pay their house note and keep it, at the end of the day, at least in the parts of California that we know, odds are they're going to have something at the end. Because when you really think about this too, I know if my parents still had the original house that they bought, and they came out here from St. Louis in the 60s, and they paid $12,500 for that house. And in 87, 88, which was one of my second year in real estate, I sold that house for $80,000. And now that stupid house, through all the stuff that we've gone through, up and down and everything else, that house today is worth $380. After all of the ups, the downs, and fluctuations of the real estate market. So I say that to say, even in my parents' case, which obviously they did sell it, and part of the reason they sold it was because of me. If they would have paid off that $12,000 house and just kept it, and now that they're in, their twilight years, and now had sold that stupid thing, what does life look like? So, it just kind of depends upon your circumstances, when you're making your decision on making an investment. But I'm just a firm, and not just because I'm a realtor, because one of the things I was taught is that, and it's worked to a point for us personally, is that, you buy something and you can use it as a stepping stone, and et cetera, and you go up the ladder. But eventually in going up the ladder, what you also continue to do is you continue to raise your monthly nut. You continuously raise your monthly nut. If you can get yourself into a situation to where you can have your principal residence, or you're able to buy it in cash, you're able to pay it off. I know that there's certain things that you don't get tax benefit wise and all that from doing that, but I'll tell you what, there's nothing like peace of mind and knowing you're going to be able to sleep somewhere all of the time, and you don't have to make a monthly mortgage payment on it any longer. Because we all know whatever we're paying for mortgage, rent, the majority of us, that's our biggest nut every month. So what if we could get rid of that? And I say that, though, because that's not necessarily the way initially that we're taught. That wasn't the way I was taught when I first got into real estate. These are things that I learned. There's a guy who's a client of mine and a good friend. And he started off as just a client, and he kind of liked me, I guess. And then we started to purchase a couple of properties, and we began to flip them. He also purchased homes for me that he actually rented out. He bought a lot of stuff out for me in the Palmdale, Lancaster area. He'd rent them out, Section 8 rent them. When the market went up, some of the houses he would refinance them and take the money out of the refinance and pay off a house. When it was all said and done, he had about 25, 30 houses. And, I think it was 25, yes. But 18 of them were paid off. So he's got 18 homes that he's getting a cash flow on. Section 8 rentals out there. For those of you who don't know what Section 8 is, it's a low-income housing type of a program, but the money's guaranteed. So the city pays the money to you every month by direct deposit. That's the basics of it. So, he's getting an average of, $1,600 a month on these 3-bedroom houses in Palmdale and Lancaster every month through the city for, all these years. But here's the point of the story. The point of the story is all the homes that we bought together, we picked up and we flipped. So he never, until now, because he's starting to retire and he's selling his homes through me, but he had never sold the ones that he bought without me. He all went to this rental. And of course, it was particularly when the market did what it did in 07. I had asked him, I said, why didn't you pull me to the side, or why didn't you pull me in on some of these other deals that you were holding on to and let me in the rental game with you? And his answer I have held in the front of my mind ever since. And this is so true. He said, Elgin, he said, when we were doing stuff and we were flipping, you were interested in making money, generating cash, and or getting rich. He goes, I was looking at creating wealth. And I was like, whoa, that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Why? Because I tell you, Shaq is rich.
Yes.
The buses are wealthy.
Yes.
The check writer, not the check receiver, is where eventually you want to be. And, of course, assuming that's what your goals and dreams or whatever are. But that made so much sense to me then, because he was right, man. You flip something and, you 50, 60 grand, or whatever, 10 grand, whatever it is. And you all of a sudden this money comes in and you do whatever, and blah, blah, blah. You buy a toy. Maybe you're smart enough to save some of it. Whatever the case may be, you're doing that, blah, blah. He just held on to his. All of a sudden, he's got 18 homes paid off. All you guys here that either do basic math and know how to use a calculator, they're on average $1,600 a month coming from 18 different places, guaranteed over about a 10-year period.
Absolutely.
That to me is the difference and the magic of real estate versus going out, say, and I'm just utilizing it as, say, for the stock market, for instance, chasing the good stock, writing the options, doing the covered calls, doing all that stuff. Again, nothing wrong with it. One thing that happens, though, when that stuff goes bad, there's nothing at the end of the day. You had paper. You had monopoly money of theirs, good money of yours. My house goes, in my personal opinion, there's not a bad time to there's not a bad time to buy a house. There's a bad time to sell it. Because until you decide to sell it, that's when the quote-unquote true value is or not. But what a lot of people do, which you and I were talking about it getting off of the air, is they still purchase above their actual means. They will go and that guy will go knowing that he cannot realistically afford $5,000 a month on the beach, but somebody will get him into a loan to where he or she does that, and they can't sustain themselves because that particular guy had to live by the beach. And I'm not talking about you. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah. No.
But that guy has to do that. Versus, in the reality is that $5,000 a month guy, he could probably comfortably make a $3,000 a month payment, but it just couldn't be by the beach. So you have to make a decision at that point. Are you going to do that and you're going to struggle through it? You come off of, the beach and you go to another particular, area and you spend $3,000 a month, or you make a decision like you've done, Lee, with your situation is that, it's better for I want to live here, bad enough that for me, it makes more sense to rent. I have some clients that, I've told them, for instance, they, for all they could afford were properties in certain areas of like Palmdale, Lancaster, maybe certain parts of the San Fernando Valley that they may not have particularly wanted to actually live in, but they have no tangible asset. I'm like, well, dude, why not? You know what? Hey, you don't own a home. Let's buy it first time. You can buy it as a personal residence. Live in it for a month or 2 or 6 months, whatever. Then rent it out. Rent it out and you go rent. You go rent, let that thing pay itself off, do it smartly, start to build something for yourself. Forget about it. You don't have to live in it, but do something. Do something with your money. And that's okay. So that's my soapbox. Did I use up all of the time on the podcast?
No, you did great. You're getting better and better. Each week I have to talk less and less, and that's the perfect part. So definitely go to eHustlePodcast.com. So that's what I was doing while Elgin was doing all that talking. I've decided it's so good it needs its own website. So go to eHustle Podcast and